I was saying hello, everyone. It has been a while since I've been in a Teams meeting with more than 60 people, 70 people, and still counting. But of course, we can only be happy with the
Can you hear?
interest for this session.
Can you hear?
So, can you hear me? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
is it clear? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So welcome to this session, and it's a talk show on the Routledge International Handbook of Engineering Ethics Education. It's a first session of several sessions to come, and this one is on AI and engineering education. Um, we try to do a talk show, and that's the idea of Diana Martin, who sends her apologies. She couldn't be here today, in which we want to mention several or discuss several topics of the handbook that the Routledge International Handbook of Engineering Ethics Education. And so today is the first one, the first session on AI and engineering education. Before we start, I would like to give the floor to Shannon, who was one of the main editors of the handbook, to say something about the handbook as a project. I know, Shannon, I saw you in the beginning, but now
I'm here. Maybe
yes,
it
you're
will
here.
pop me
Yes.
up. Lovely to see so many people here. Really great to see this kind of energy as we start launching our handbook, which just was published in December. It's an open access resource, so you can read it online. You can download the digital copy for free. I want to say this was an amazing project to be part of. We had 6 editors. 4 of them are here today. That's Roland, Gunter, Thomas, and myself. And Tom and Diana are not able to be here today, but we also had 99 other people along with us who helped make this possible. So some of the successes that we're really happy about with this handbook are that we had a really international representation. We got really good geographic participation among the authors. We had teams that were from multiple continents in most cases, and it was a really highly collaborative event activity. For a handbook, this is an amazing work because it is reporting things that I would consider to be primary research in many of the chapters. And I think that's something that sets us apart as engineering education research, that a lot of our books that are typically secondary research, that format, that we're actually always trying to generate something new. So it was really collaborative, and I think it went a long way towards giving something to the community for capacity building. So today we start helping make sure that people know it's here and that they learn ways into the handbook, into the community if they aren't already, and get more involved with what we're trying to do and with the tools that we've created. So Gunter, thank you so much for taking on the hosting today.
It's a pleasure, Shannon. And before we really kick off, maybe a few practicalities. As we are so many, it's good to have the microphones off when you're not talking. This meeting is being recorded, as you see, so if you don't want your face, then don't put your camera on. We are really many people, 92 I see right now. So the format is something like a talk show and interactive. I've never done this before, 92, 93 participants. So I would say let's start with raising digital hands and see where it goes. I think it will work, but I'm not sure. But I think in parallel we can use the chat with all kinds. I see there are already things, and Scott already put a link to the handbook there. So I think it's nice if you have like all kinds of ideas, put them in the chat and start reading it while you're listening. That can only add to the dynamics. So yeah, I think that's about it. So the topic of today, the first session, is on AI and engineering ethics education. It's a very broad topic. And we are many participants, so I guess that many of you have different expectations. So my aim is not to, when I hear the first topic, just delve into that really particular topic, because it's certainly possible and every topic can have its specific elaboration for at least 1 hour. So here we would like touching upon the broad topic of AI and engineering education, and like exploring what kind of elements are important here. And for this, we have 3 great speakers for you. And in the to save a bit of time, I just will ask you to introduce yourself a bit, and I would like to start with Mihály. Because in chapter 7, engineering ethics, I have to look at the paper. I don't know the chapters by heart, but engineering ethics education and artificial intelligence sketches a general picture of AI in engineering education. So I think Mihály is together with Cecile Hardebolle and Vivek Ramachandran. So I think it's a good start to kick this talk show off for real. So, Mihály, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Mihály Héder, and I'm from Budapest, Hungary. I'm a very lucky person, first of all, because I was invited to be here. So thank you so much for the organizers, but also I'm lucky because I was involved in the book. So thanks for the editors as well. And also I'm a very lucky person because in 2009, when I finished with my computer science master's, I kind of didn't want to go to the computer science PhD and went to philosophy instead, without giving it much thought. And it was philosophy of AI, and of course it's paid off spectacularly, because then later AI became so prevalent and important. So if that's okay, I can talk a few minutes about how I created this ethics of AI class several years ago, before the big rush came. And it was always a problem for me where to start and how to think about the whole thing. And in over 10 semesters after that, I still always rearranged the things. So first, it seemed that with the arrival of this very, very capable new AI, so this is number one, right? We have this wave of new AI that's more capable than anything before. It will be the transparency or the bias question that will be very important. These are very important, of course, but it could be that this could be solved in short to medium term to some satisfaction, of course, not completely. So I'd say, please think about the market of operating systems, for instance. And you will find that you have the one that the most people use, not so great, and then there's a more expensive one for the people who want to be free and that use a different license. And then there's a few that is niche, so of course Windows, macOS, iOS, Linux, BSD, and then the list ends there. In effect, of course, there might be PhD project or something. So there is all of these billions of people, and there is very few software stacks that we can use. So this means that there is huge potential for technological lock-in, and this is because of the easy replication of software. Unlike if you have a car company, it's one thing to design a car and it's expensive, but also it's expensive to replicate your design to actual cars, because it takes energy and materials. But software, of course, still takes some energy and materials, but it's much easier. So software can spread like a virus. And then the first thing I wanted to say is AI is software-like in that sense. So it's very possible that the market will be very similar to the operating systems market, where there is one that is expensive and very good, and then there's the free one for people who want to run their own. And then we might end up, when it comes to AI, I think about generative AI, for instance, now, with a few solutions. And my point in this is that then the responsibility is extremely high for those who are creating these systems. So that's where I always start. It's like somehow the metaphysics of AI, if you will, if I want to be grand about it. But just to say that this thing The investment, if you did the investment, you can exploit it endlessly. And even if you don't like the license, somebody does it with an open source license, and then you exploit that endlessly. So this generation that is creating AI now is probably locking in some future generations into one particular AI solution. So that's, I always like to explain to software engineering students that I have a lot of, that the responsibility is much higher. And it could be that theoretically with explainable AI and other metrics, fairness metrics, you could solve some of the things that are problems now, but then you couldn't implement it because the market is already saturated and the investment would be so large that it would be very hard. So that's one thing, technological lock-in. And it's usually not the where people start with ethics of AI, but I like to start here. And the second, and I won't tell more, is I think what is also very important to understand is the responsibility gap. So there are several topics in ethics of AI, and the responsibility gap is just one. It appears shortly in our book. It remains. So that so responsibility gap just quickly means that AI are effective agents in the sense that they make decisions, but they are not effective on taking on accountability. And also society doesn't allow them. So if your autonomous car were to hit somebody, you wouldn't send the autonomous car into jail or dismantle it or whatever, because it wouldn't be satisfactory for society to do that, right? And so the responsibility for the decisions will remain with humans. And I see our engineering students to do that in the future, generating solutions, generating text, generating images, generating designs. The price of that goes down dramatically. There's a disruption in the market. You want software code. Before you had maybe to hire an intern, and that costs money and time and effort. I used to have, I think, maybe 40 interns in my career. And if I'm being honest, if I'm only going for the software code, I don't want any more interns ever, because I'm having more success with ChatGPT. I have to review either way the output, right? So if I'm having interns, it's only because from some other reason, like building a community or maintaining the future, whatever. So the review function.
Okay, Mihály.
Yeah, sorry.
You're ending your story because.
Yes, we're almost there. So I wanted to say,
yes.
Value of generating things go down, and value of reviewing things remains the same for a very long term. And so our students shouldn't be authors anymore. They should become editors, for instance, if we are talking about papers. But then how can you become an editor right away, right? So that's the real challenge I see. And sorry if I was wrong.
No. It's my job. It's your job to be enthusiastic. It is my job to do the time management. Thank you, Héder. But yeah, I've been listening. Lock-in, responsibility gap, disruption of the market. Students have to be not coding, but they have to do much more. There is a beautiful chapter 18, ethical issues in software engineering, who I guess have the answer. Is that so, Stephanie?
I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure that there really is a clear answer. So first of all, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I would like to thank everyone for joining, as well as the editors and the rest of the panelists. So I come from the chapter on ethical issues in software engineering. My background is in computer science, and I actually focus on computing and engineering education at Florida International University in the United States. And in our chapter, we think about all of the different issues that may arise, both from development, but also the different applications and the implications of software development, thinking about software use, thinking about the data lifecycle, thinking about the implications of what's being gathered and used and stored. So I'm not sure how much you want me to go into our chapter, or is that sufficient for an introduction on me?
You're free to play with it. Just refer to the chapter or the ideas that come up in your mind right now. We're all interested.
Great. So I think that this is a very important and very timely topic. Particularly, it's such a buzzword now, and I feel like everyone wants to think about how they can use and apply AI. More and more we hear from students that they're like, this is going to be the solution that we're going to propose for all of our problems that we're facing in the engineering world. But practically speaking, there's a lot of implications for that. So thinking about everything from fairness and bias to privacy and all of the different areas in between becomes very important. We want to try to manage our risks. We want to try to anticipate the risks that could arise. So in our chapter, we try to discuss all of the different things that educators could do to maybe try to raise some of these topics with their students. We have different approaches that they can take. We provide different case studies, as well as different tools and checklists so that hopefully we can encourage discussions around this topic.
Okay, and can you give an example of what this would mean in real practice for I don't know how many teachers there are amongst us who are really looking for answers to not tomorrow but today, to find answers in how to relate to AI in education and to support to the relevance of or the responsibility of software engineers.
So I think that's a great point. And so our chapter, we really try to focus on different opportunities, both for educators, but there's also a lot there for practitioners as well. So I think it's really critical to note that this isn't just something that is important for one type of audience or one particular actor. This really impacts everyone. There's so many people who are using this, particularly with generative AI nowadays. So thinking about the impact of all of the different tools that keep being created and those who are using them becomes really important. So within the chapter, we talk about everything from case studies to start those discussions. Like I mentioned, everything from different tools to the data ethics decision aid, the ethical operating system checklist, and thinking about things like if you were to be using a virtual reality headset, for example, or you're the creator of that, and then you have a company that is now using these internal probes to track all of your facial expressions and so that it can respond with a photorealistic avatar in real time, for example. What does it mean that they've collected this data? At what point in time does continuing to store this data become a problem? And what if they start to use it for other purposes? And so thinking about not just when you're using something, but what are the long-term impacts of that? And how can we try to anticipate that? And then even for users, what are we consenting to? How often do people just click yes to terms of agreement without ever really reading all the details? How often are those details not really made clear and digestible? So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for folks to think about the implications for all of the different people that this can impact.
Yeah, great. So you mentioned a lot of elements that are related to the design of engineering education, like case studies or the virtual reality approaches. Scott Daniel wrote a chapter 23, together with Adetun Yaman and William Oakes, Ethics in Service Learning and Humanitarian Engineering Education. And if you listen carefully, there is no word AI and there is no word software there. Nevertheless, Scott knows a lot about this, and I think it's also very important in terms of having a broad discussion of the role of AI. You can look at AI tools and what they can do or what the dangers are, but I think the non-AI aspects of your engineering education design are part of the socio-technical system, which is a course where your students are. So in that sense, I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Scott, about the ethics in service learning and humanitarian engineering education, starting from that chapter, but also bringing your broader perspective into the mix.
Thanks so much, Gunter, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you all here tonight. It's tonight my time because I'm in Sydney. I'm dialing in from the University of Technology, Sydney. And I saw a couple of people from Australia in the chat as well, so hello to everyone. Yeah, I think probably we all have imposter syndrome at one time or another, but I did wonder, about my invitation to this, because my chapter isn't exactly to do with Gen AI. And however, I did do some other work around assessment integrity with Gen AI in engineering education. And because I went third, I had the liberty of looking up the links to put in the chat. And just a couple of comments, and then I'll talk about the chapter as well. But I found it interesting with Mihály talking about students as editors. One of the findings that we had is that with if we work on an assumption that many students are thanks Shannon, that many students are using Gen AI, perhaps we need to put a greater emphasis on evaluative judgment, or change the standard that we expect students to be able to come up with, where what previously would have passed with a generated response, maybe we just have to impose stricter criteria about what to put more weight on critical thinking or creativity in what students come up with. But to my chapter though, that was mentioned by Gunter, like that was focused on humanitarian engineering and service learning, and how ethics can play a role in those areas. And what I think there's maybe I'll just take a second to define what those are for people that aren't familiar with them. The kind of short version is maybe that it's engineering for social justice, and they have been framed in different ways, but that's kind of the idea of it, that it's how engineering can contribute to addressing social injustice, and whether that's at disaster relief or long-term community development. And my interest in that is in an education aspect. How can we prepare students for those contexts? And at the time of writing that chapter, Gen AI was just coming onto the radar and wasn't addressed in that chapter. But one of the strategies that we use in developing student skills is scenario-based teaching, where we can't maybe take thousands of students that we have and put them in a developing country context, and neither for the ethics of imposing their naivety on the people that they'd be working with, but also just practically. But what we can do is pose scenarios that have some ethical complexity to them and have students work through them. And one way that I've actually used Gen AI in the last, since it's the last couple of years, is generating novel scenarios for students to respond to that have a lot of complexity to them that I might not be able to come up with as creatively myself or as quickly, that are in different disciplinary contexts to appeal to different types of students, and also in different cultural contexts. And as a resource for improving the prolific development of resources, I think that's one area that Gen AI has been helpful. So I might leave it there and go back to you, Gunter, if you have any follow-up questions.
Thanks. So for me, maybe the circle is like round again. It's you ended more or less where Mihály started, and doing the 3 presentations. It already gives a very broad and a huge overview of all kinds of topics that are at stake. We all know there are many more, and we are with 110 people in this meeting. So now I invite you, those who want, to just raise your digital hands, and we will start a discussion. So is there anything remarkable, something that struck you from what the speaker said, that can be of importance to others that you want to share, that might create more discussion? So please feel free. And also feel free to put things in the chat as well. It's always a difficult moment. It's finding the raise hand is one thing. Yeah, Scott, you have a question yourself, maybe for yourself or for the others.
I don't know if that helps break the ice or not, but just one thing that Stephanie said, and as I was reflecting on what I'd talk about, you mentioned how the generation of avatars and how Gen AI can enable that. And in my own teaching, one strategy that I tried to use to develop students' empathy is to have them develop personas for different stakeholders, as a kind of more engaged way of identifying what their interests and attitudes and so on might be about the topic. And then I just realized that if I gave it, so I have assessments where students have to generate personas of different stakeholders. and in my head, that's a vehicle for their empathy, but the artifact is just a persona. With Gen AI, they could just do it in a second, and it would be just as good as other ones. So I'm just wondering if you have any comments about, or anyone in the group has comments around some of the professional skills that we use different artifacts as a proxy for the development of, and how Gen AI can simulate those. I don't know, Stephanie, if you want to respond, or anyone else?
Sure, it would be my pleasure. So I actually teach a class, Professional Development and Engineering for a Global Society. So I've thought a lot about what are different opportunities that we can potentially integrate generative AI, because right now we know that students are going to be required to do this on the job market. Increasingly, people are starting to use generative AI in their day-to-day jobs. And so I've been thinking about how we can try to generate some skills that are useful, but also integrate it with course content. So for example, in this course in particular, I have started to integrate something that I found was useful in my class on AI ethics and societal impact, which was I may give students a prompt around a particular topic. In your case, maybe creating personas, although I think that there's a lot of different opportunities to do that. Right now, I have a prompt where students are doing this with grand challenges in engineering and trying to tackle one of the grand challenges. And so I have students try to reflect on their own perspective on how they would want to work towards achieving these goals locally, nationally, and internationally. And then I have them run the same exact prompt that I've asked them to complete as part of a reflection using generative AI. And I say, you can pick what you want. If you want it to be Claude.ai, if you want to use Gemini, if you want to use ChatGPT. And then I want you to write another page reflecting on how your answer may be similar or differ from that of the generative AI. So I feel like sometimes there's opportunities to maybe say, hey, here's a way you can try to use this tool, how we can try to think about tweaking our assignments, but also be reflective on what may work, how it can be beneficial, but also trying to think about maybe some of its limitations. And I think in the other context, I also do some mock job interviews as part of the professional development component. And so sometimes I'll have them use generative AI tools in this class because it's a very interdisciplinary class. So I have some interdisciplinary engineering students. I have some from computer science. I have some from biomedical engineering. And so sometimes I think it can be helpful to use it as a mock interviewer to generate questions and say, if you were going into a job interview, you ask someone, your peer, to be the pretend interviewer, and use generative AI to ask for examples of if someone was going through an interview for the role of interest for this particular student, what are some questions that may be asked, and what are some examples of good, medium, and maybe poor responses? And so I may try to give them these prompts so that way they can try to gain some skills and practice, but also practically get some prompt engineering practice as well.
Yeah, is that an answer to your question, Scott? Yeah, okay. I saw a comment on that. I'm trying to follow the chat. Parakram Payarukurel, sorry for my pronunciation. So you also had a point on Stephanie's ideas. I don't know if you want to speak up. Oh, yeah, no. No, if not, Louis, do you have a question? Because there are so many pop-ups here. Okay, please go. Yeah.
Thank you, Gunter. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Perfect.
can.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to have an idea of your experience regarding the reaction of students towards this kind of approach. My understanding is that most of the students are mainly motivated for technical and scientific skills, and this kind of experiences is quite recent. I wonder how motivated your students are and how aware are they to this kind of approach. Perhaps it would be useful in a meeting like this one to have the testimony of some students. I don't know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a question for any of you, I think. Maybe Mihály, you...
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would say we are beyond the point where we should ask the student to test these things because they realize that they can fulfill some of the requirements in a shorter route and they are in time pressure. So it's already here. And the reason I just wanted to reinform Lois's mentioning of motivation. I think that's key. So if the students see that they can generate better code that they could write, on the other hand, the students see that some other students would do their theses with ChatGPT and the others would put in the hard work and the first group would get better grades, then motivation is killed. And I think this is one of the biggest risks that we face with the generative AI. So that's why in my faculty, we allow any generative AI to be used in a transparent way for any thesis or homework, because otherwise the assessment can't be fair. And if there is no fairness, then the motivation is dead. But then this brings in the next question that I already mentioned in my intro, is that why would you work hard if you see that machines can do your job better and in a cheaper way? And that's why we also kind of need to get rid of these. So I think step one, allow homeworks and thesis work to be done with the generative AI. Step two, get rid of these tools as assessment tools. And then you want to assess the process of becoming a professional and not some documentation that is generated and called a thesis at the end of the process. And so what you will do is send your students to a company for a mandatory internship and then call the company. Is this person solving problems? Is this person functioning well? And that portfolio of good decisions and problem solving can become your diploma in the future. I think this is what has to happen. Otherwise, students will feel there is no point in anything that they are doing, and I'm very much afraid of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Anyone wants to add to that, Scott or Stephanie? There is another question for you, Stephanie, in the chat. Let's see, because it's going fast. I've lost it. I'll take Shannon. You had also a question about teaching bachelor students.
Yeah, I think Mihály just answered it pretty well.
Okay.
But I mean, any tips for doing what he was talking about would be most appreciated, because I'm not an expert in not even close. But I would like to be helping my students who are doing digital construction and research to support digital construction to be able to use these tools effectively.
Yeah. If I may share some tips that we are experimenting with, one is that I always try to reframe the motivation part for the students is it's like doing sports. You see, machines are much stronger than you are in lifting stuff and anything, and you still lift weights or whatever you run. And then you do that because you want to have the health and the health benefits, and also to be able to say that you can run, I don't know, this far, or you can lift that weight or whatever. And what means is that you do that not as for living. So I can't ask my students to lift weights all day for living, because they are university students, and anybody should automatize that process. And now I can't ask them to write code all day, because it's like lifting bricks. But I can say, I still want you to be able to every now and then lift up something, and I still want you to be able to every now and then write good code, like in a sport exercise. That's my parallel. So the motivation should have to have the skill. Machine will fail you, won't be there in a conversation that you have to make quick decisions. So you have to have the skills, but it's not fair to ask you to do this 9 to 5. If the machines are better at it, that's not the point. It's against our civilization norms. So that's one thing. And the other thing is somehow strengthening the ethos of universitas. There is a opportunity here. Make students review. So you write one thing and then you review 3. You write one homework and you review 3 others. And then the student becomes like me, because I stopped writing thesis some time ago. and I instead reviewing thesis. And the students are writing thesis, but never review thesis. And it's not good. We are not the same. We are not in the universitas anymore. So they are on my side now, and they learn how bad it is when you get, too long intro that doesn't say anything, that you have to read through it now because it might be hallucination. So if they are on our camp of reviewing and assessing themselves, and if it's software quality control or testing. If they do it as well, then they understand the other side of these things, not just the generation. So that's one trick that could be done, and I think it works very well.
All right, I can maybe add. So I do a lot of challenge-based learning. So I ask companies to bring in an ethical issue that they are working on, and for me there is a trick of shifting the AI border towards the stakeholders. So I say, okay, you have an issue and there are ethical stuff in it and technical stuff in it, and the students have to solve it. So these external stakeholders, people from companies or governmental bodies, they are on top of the AI applications, and they still have problems. So they bring in the problems with really high level AI, and then I can say to the students, yeah, now it's up to you. Use every AI you want. Of course, there are issues, and that's what this discussion is all about. But it helps me to not be myself on top of the AI stuff, but ask others to bring this in. So I think it links with what you are saying, Mihály. Yeah. Several other questions. Yeah.
Can
okay.
I just,
yes, go ahead, Scott.
Add something to what you said, Gunter. And it's 11:30 p.m. my time, so it's just gone out of my head. But I think I was just going to say something about the value of critical thinking, and that we can't just use the same assessments that we have in the past. And in fact, Sydney University, which is just down the road from my campus here in New South Wales, have taken, I think they call it like a 2-lane approach, where they have 2 types of assessments. One is where it's invigilated with a lot of scrutiny, so that they try to limit, like I said, it's like an exam, for example, which has its own weaknesses, but they try to have some assessments that are Gen AI is not a part of the assessment, but then for all the other assessments, they assume and try to incorporate an assumption that students are going to use Gen AI. So they set a standard higher, and they just say, we're going to assume all students are using Gen AI for these assessments, and design our criteria and the assessment design on that assumption. And forgive me being a little bit fuzzy because it's late here.
No problem. But then the question is, so I can throw the ball back and say, okay, I'm an ethics teacher. First, is that I think a lot of my students, they are engineering students. Several of them really don't use it, I'm sure. And I talk to them and I believe them. It's not because they say they want to hide, because they could use it in my course. So there is a distinction. The distinction remains, what also the 2 others were referring to, of those who use it and those who don't use it. And then I get like 10-page of philosophy text written by AI. What should I do with it? If I read it, I'm not grading the student. I'm grading OpenAI. So how do I cope with it? And it's also a question to the 2 other panelists.
My short version, of the response is that we don't leave the assessment unchanged. And not that I have all of the answers as to how best to change to incorporate that assumption, but I think what you've just pointed out is that if we leave the assessment unchanged and say write a 10-page philosophy essay on some topic,
yeah,
that Gen AI is really good at that, and so
yeah,
we have to rethink what we're asking students to do and what assurance that gives of the learning that we're hoping that they'll learn. And we have to really rethink a lot of our assessments where Gen AI can pass or even do exceptionally well. But Stephanie and Mihály, did you want to add anything?
Oh, I definitely agree with that. And I would say to your point, earlier where you were asking me, how do you think about trying to create some of these things around proxy measures? I think, both of you have mentioned at some point that things have changed. The playing field has changed. We need to rethink the way that we're doing our assignments, the way we're redoing our assessments, because this is going to be used. And we're now thinking about critical thinking. We now are thinking about all of these other things and how we may try to get at some of these concepts and really help students to internalize this content and what this may mean for them. And I think that's still changing, and there's a lot of opportunities for us to develop maybe new learning activities, new approaches, new assessments. But I think this field is still in its infancy, and it's taking a little bit of creativity and also coming together and discussing opportunities for what that may look like.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And maybe another thing is, and now I'm making a bridge to one of the questions. One of the things is, of course, making the students question their own use of AI and the ethical aspects. And it was not my initial plan to give the floor to those with the most thumbs up, but Roland Tormy, one of the editors, has 7 thumbs up on the aspects of energy use of AI and making students aware of that or discussing that. I don't know, Roland, as an editor, people can see your face, certainly, and maybe you want to ask your question yourself.
No, thanks, Gunter.
Yes.
My question was just around how we make students or help students become aware of the ethical issues around this, not just in terms of their own engagement with it, but in terms of the costs of generating these tools in the first place. So, generative AI seems to use a lot more energy than, for example, traditional web searches. Do we make students aware of that? Do we give them ways of calculating what that might be? Do we provide them with the information that they would need to make good decisions around that? And I think there are huge issues around the data which was used to train these tools, right? Which may or may not have been, stolen or scraped off the web in various different ways. How do we feel about that? How do we communicate with students around, intellectual property versus open data, open knowledge, etc.? How do we help them understand the ethics issues around the choices they're making around these tools?
Thanks. Any answers from the panelists?
So I'll say that I think scaffolding is really important. And particularly, there's a lot of times where you may want to describe all the potential of these tools to students, but it's also important to discuss the ethical implications. And I found that this is much easier when you have an entire course dedicated to ethics and you have the time to dig into all of these subjects a bit more. So sustainability, intellectual property, what does it mean for an AI tool to be a creator? I know that the policy implications around the world are very different in terms of what's in place and how far along they are. And so I think all of these things need to be discussed, but I also acknowledge that sometimes it's very hard to fit all of this in a reasonable way, particularly with other material. So I think it's always helpful to try to integrate it as much as possible in smaller ways, even if there isn't necessarily time to do all kinds of activities and get into all of these different areas within different courses. So I see it as this is a great opportunity to include scaffolding around a particular topic or lesson, maybe do a learning activity, and then introduce some of these and try to start the discussion. Because I think if we can start to integrate this throughout curricula, that's when we're going to start to see more ethical mindsets in regard for this, rather than just inserting it at one point and students are only touching this at one time in their career.
Thanks. Mihály,
Yeah,
okay. Scott first and then Mihály. Yeah.
Sorry to jump in, but what I was just reflecting on with Roland's question, and I saw a boy's comment in the chat about how other industries are equally implicated in being energy intensive, which raises sustainability concerns. I started writing my comments. I'll put it in the chat incomplete, but I think there's always a socio-technical sustainability dimension to engineering practice, and I think we're getting better at it, but a lot of our curriculum just pretends that there isn't, or divorces engineering practice from any social context and social impact. And so I think just in general, a challenge for us all that I'm still struggling to meet, but is to try to make those social dimensions visible in how we talk about even what might just be a technical, what we might otherwise just think of as solely technical. There's always a social context that it's practiced within.
Okay, thanks. And Mihály?
Yes, on this carbon footprint and the ecological considerations, I think I have maybe a bit more unusual position, let's just say. And it's like, I think this is of course important to talk about, but this is also leads to very interesting questions, because humans also have carbon footprint. If you ever sent a junior engineer abroad to a training, you might have caused more harm to the environment than using ChatGPT for an extended period of time. I just looked it up for a thing I bought, is that when it comes to inference, the generic text-based answer would take the equivalent of 2 to 3 seconds of watching Netflix if you do it with ChatGPT, and if you generate an image, that's 2.5 minutes of viewing Netflix. And so the alternative cost is a very interesting thing here, not Netflix, but alternative cost of creating companies to do intellectual work that could be also done by AI versus doing work that couldn't be, like caring for other people and things like that. So I think this could be the carbon footprint question could be very surprising if you really start to think about it, and then you will find that you are morally obligated to use AI because it's much cheaper once it's trained than to rely on humans who could do something else that can't be done by AI.
Yes. So one of the things I take from this is really link the AI and ethics and the AI and philosophy aspects to the life world of the students, so to speak. I want to use this trick to question a side discussion that I see going on in the chat. Some people use AI assistants helping them take notes, and I see other people commenting on that. So I asked the people from SEFI what is the policy about it, and guess what they answer? We don't have a policy yet. Of course, because AI goes fast. And this is really what we probably see happening in the classroom as well. So we think we are prepared for the next week, and then something happens with the AI, and then we're not prepared anymore. So I just want to use our discussion of AI and ethics on this topic. So we're all interested in the topic. Some use this AI assistance, and some have issues with it. And it's a new thing. How do we cope with it here and now? And let's start with the speakers, whether you have ideas, but I also invite those who are using the assistance or mentioned issues in the chat to give their ideas. Sorry, Scott, it's very late for you, getting later and later.
And you told me my job is to be enthusiastic. I'm
yes,
doing my best.
That was my.
I think I think just with your question before, more generally, and I mean, I'm working on this as well. I think we just have to be okay with a bit of discomfort that things are changing, and we can't have business as usual, and we have to be okay with a bit of ambiguity and what best practice is. So that's not an answer. It's maybe like an attitudinal thing that we can't just pretend that isn't happening and pretend that that 10-page essay on philosophy is our brilliant teaching writ large. So I think we just have to have some. I'm just still in acceptance. I haven't moved beyond that yet.
No, it's okay. Stephanie or Mihály?
Yeah, I can go. So it was very nice. It's not
Yeah.
mentioned acceptance, because I always think about this as the Kubler-Ross model of grief. First you're in denial, then you're angry, then you're sad, and then slowly you come to the realization that this change has happened, and now you have to integrate it into your life. And I think in general, so for the particular issue in using, let's say, note-taking apps and things like that, so in this particular context, maybe not my place to say it, but it's of course publicly viewable and recorded, so it's not an added thing on that. And also Otter AI and stuff like that, they will use the EU-US data governance agreement that is in place already. But in general, I think it could be a very again, I'm saying risky things, but maybe if you keep in mind what they call the cold language dilemma, is that when technology is early, you don't know how to police it, because you don't know about the bad side effects and everything. And technology is ubiquitous. You know what to change, but you can't change it anymore. So this is what we have here, is to find the exact moment of policy making. And I'm sure that it's not the first 2 years of ChatGPT when everybody just realizes it's here, even though a lot of harm can be done. But I remember I thought one thing about it when the students first started using it, and myself as well. And now I'm thinking something else, like 1.5 years later, in many respects, and some things stayed the same. So I think this is not a bad moment to think about that, but it's also not a problem that we don't pre-regulate everything before they start working, because we don't have the information. So it's an epistemic limitation of us.
Yeah. Stephanie, anything to add?
I would definitely agree with my colleagues, but also I feel bad. Lewis has been patiently waiting for a while, so I want to make sure we get to his question.
Yeah, I first want to give the floor to, and I know, Lewis, fortunately it's your digital hand, so your arm is not getting tired. But I think Aboy Verkuilen, if I remember the chat correctly, you were one raising the question, right? Is your point on the AI? You're mute. At least I can't hear you. Still not.
Does this work?
Yes.
Yes.
Does.
The wrong microphone.
Okay.
I first wanted to come to comment to Scott. I think it was that he said there, or maybe it was Mihály, I'm not sure. We have regulations in place. They are already there. We are just not enforcing it. So now I'm referring to GDPR. That is already there. And we can just use that one as a first guidance. And second of all, yes, of course, we don't have regulations for every new AI that pops up, but we still have values and we still have norms, and we then can still have a discussion about it and think what should we do or should not do. And in case of Otter AI, it has been around there, I think, over a year already. So with that one, I think we should have already had an answer instead of just let it happen. The name of this meeting was the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I must say, not have a discussion about it, that for me would classify as bad and ugly.
Okay, thanks.
So
we are, yeah.
I was going to say, okay, so I will weigh in that I agree that it definitely is something that's prevalent, and I feel like a lot of times there isn't consent given. I have seen opportunities, I feel like in some Zoom meetings, it asks me if, an AI assistant is going to be joining, are you okay with this? So I could see maybe making that a part of smaller discussions, but I know in situations like this, it also can be more challenging. So it may be something that has to be in place, that maybe it's a blanket policy that does say something to the effect of, we are not going to allow it for this purpose because there isn't the option for everyone to consent in, but I think it's still going to be something that needs to be worked on and discussed more.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, what Aboy is saying, some things are indeed around for longer, but it's also like This is for me also the first time that I see it happening in a chat. So I think the people from SEFI, a few people are here, so they definitely will take it up and by the next meeting in our chat certainly, but also other chats, they will certainly do something with it. I'm looking at the time. 5 minutes left for this meeting. Louis, do you still have because I want to give a bit of time for the three speakers to round up, let's say 1 minute. So if you have a short question that can have a short answer, we can still take it.
Thank you, Gunter. Very quickly. I've been using ChatGPT with some students, and I'd like to distinguish between traditional assessment and kind of problem-based learning. I think the issue is much less important in challenge-based learning than it is in traditional assessment.
Yes.
Still, if students use, for instance, ChatGPT, I think perhaps I will look old-fashioned, but if for some reason you suspect that some issue is taking place, there is nothing that compares to a face-to-face dialogue with the student. I think this is the ultimate solution if for some reason you suspect that something is going wrong. That said, let me just tell you, I've been using ChatGPT so much and with so much profit that recently I told ChatGPT, even if you don't exist, I love you. And it laughed a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for these wise words who lead to like a kind of conclusion. So can I, and that's the question for Scott, Stephanie, and Mihály, can you in, let's say, 1 minute, because there are 3 minutes left, say what do you take away from this discussion for the next handbook?
Jeez.
No, the last one was
we've
a
just
joke.
got a minute each.
Yes. Just what do you take away from this discussion? Yeah.
I'll take a couple of things. One is how lovely it is to talk to other people that are interested in exploring some of the complexity here. It's a reality that we're in. And I'm just being tempted to go to SEFI Ethics Symposium in March. Thanks, Shannon. I think we've talked, good, bad, and the ugly. I think, with what Louis was just saying, how he's using it so frequently, we have to think about how our students are going to be using it, and it's going to be ubiquitous. And so I think we also have like an ethical obligation to prepare our students for the future of practice. And so we can't ignore it, and we have to think about how we can use it effectively, maintain assessment integrity, and prepare students for graduation.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Mihály?
Everything Scott said I wanted to say, so I won't repeat, but I agree. But I then also add, I have this little experiment I'm running. If anybody is raising in any of these settings AI and military, and this time it again did not happen. So when we talk about the ugly, I think that's something that's like somehow in a blind spot, the military application of AI that probably, let's say 100% is happening already. And then we are kind of avoid it because we feel it's outside of our scope. Maybe we shouldn't. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Also wise words. Stephanie?
So again, I want to thank everyone for joining today. I will say that I think AI is, often compared to the new calculator, where we know that it is something that exists and is going to start to continue to be used. So it's really just a matter of how and what we can do, as educators, as practitioners, and all of the different areas we may want to start to think about. And I think having discussions like this, having opportunities to come together and talk about this and raise issues and opportunities to maybe think about how we can try to approach this can be really helpful. So I think together as a community, hopefully we can work to head off some of these concerns and think about the potential benefits and approach the good, the bad, and the ugly aspects of AI.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, Scott, Mihály, and Stephanie. And this brings us to the end of the first session on AI and engineering education of the International Handbook of Engineering Ethics Education. there will be more, and you found a way to this one, so you probably will also find the way to the other one. So we are looking forward to see you in the next meetings as well. Yeah, bye.